Good evening. Welcome to Live United. Living United, where we have an opportunity to hear about all the wonderful programs here in the Monadnock region that make a difference in the lives of our citizens. Today, I'm joined by Michael Oserno. Michael is the Transportation Manager for Home Health Care, Hospice, and Community Services. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you for having me, Kelly.
Well, thank you for being here. You know, transportation, is a little bit close to my heart because it's so critical to people in rural areas particularly, and making sure that people can get around, get to jobs, go to school, get to the services, most importantly, that they need, because we oftentimes are talking about the human service needs here on this show. So you have a variety of, in your role as a transportation manager, have a variety of responsibilities over at HCS that help move people around and provide that mobility for people to get to not only services at home health care, but services in our community. So let's talk about those services a little bit. Let's start out, where would you like to start? Because you've got quite a few things that you're working with, and we are going to feature Friendly Bus today, but there's other things that you work with over at HCS.
Yes, there are. Our main services are fixed route, our bus service here in the city of Keene, and that's just like any service in any big city in the country. The fixed route services run regular bus stops at regular times around the city and take folks to shopping centers, to the hospital, to work. And then we run a campus shuttle that runs around the Keene State College campus, runs out to the Monadnock Marketplace, and then over to Market Basket for folks so they can do some shopping there, and then back. And folks can transfer from one bus to another for free. It's a great service, gets people around. One of our goals at HCS is to keep people in an independent living situation for as long as possible in their lives. And the city bus, the City Express, does a great job of that in conjunction with, of course, the Friendly Bus, which is what we wanted to focus a little bit on today. The Friendly Bus is a service for anyone over the age of 60, the elderly, and anyone who has a disability and can't access that City Express bus. The Friendly Bus is operated mainly by donations and with some help, some funding from some other sources, federal and state sources, and a little bit from advertising. And then, of course, we run a once-a-week service on Wednesdays up to White River Junction in Lebanon for folks that have appointments up at the VA hospital or at Dartmouth Hitchcock. And anyone can just call our office. Those rides, again, those are free. We ask for a donation, but it's every Wednesday. Every Wednesday morning the bus leaves and takes folks up there for their critical appointments.
So let's talk City Express first, the public bus service,
Sure.
Public transit. That's open to anybody who's traveling around the Keene area. You don't have to necessarily be a resident. You can jump on that bus and go out to the YMCA. Are you going out to the YMCA now?
We are. That's a stop we added about a year ago. We're very proud of that stop because it took us quite a while to get that stop incorporated in there, with some help from our Passenger Advisory Committee. But yeah, out to the YMCA, just about anywhere in Keene. We hit all the major shopping centers and then housing developments. We try to pick up folks where the population is. But we're always open to suggestions. If anyone has any ideas about where maybe we could better serve the public, we're always open to ideas. We run them through our Passenger Advisory Committee, and then we'd have a public hearing to see if that's what folks really want us to do.
Now, so you have a public transit system. Friendly Bus is quite different because I believe it's door to door that Friendly Bus runs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So explain that to the public.
Well, folks call us 24 hours in advance. They give us a day's notice, and we schedule rides for them, as you say, from door to door. We'll pick them up at their homes or wherever they are, take them wherever they want to go, and then they call us and we pick them up and bring them back. And it provides a critical service for some folks to either medical appointments, shopping, otherwise maybe they couldn't get out to do shopping on their own, and in some cases it's just for a trip to the beauty parlor. But for some folks that's their only means of getting out into the world for the day. We think it's a very critical service, and I feel good at the end of the day when I go home. I've provided a service for someone. I helped someone get somewhere today that they needed to go. And we have quite a group of regular customers. We know most people, we know their families, we know what's going on in their lives. They're just like, it's like being at Cheers sometimes. When people call in, we're on a first name basis. It's kind of a neat place to work, and it's like I say, I really truly believe in this service. I like what I do, and I think it's a valuable service to the City of Keene.
So we have the City Express, we have Friendly Bus. You also provide service to people that are coming to the program's unique to home health care, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have an adult daycare center, the Castle Center at HCS, and every morning we pick folks up around the City of Keene and bring them into the Castle Center so they can spend the day, enjoy some activities and a nice nutritious lunch. We also pick folks up just for lunch. We have a meal every day at the Castle Center, and we pick up quite a few folks. Sometimes it's a pretty rowdy group out there, singing on the bus and just having a good time. And again, it's like if you stepped onto the bus, you'd think you walked into the Cheers bar. Everybody knows everybody's name, and it's a really fun thing to do. But back to the Castle Center, the adult day center trip. We pick folks up in the morning, they spend the day there, they have lunch, they spend the afternoon, and then we bring them home.
So, I think sometimes we don't realize the importance of transportation as it comes to people having needs met, and keeping them in those independent living situations. We think of it as, we've become so independent almost in our own transportation aspect of life that most people own a car or own a bike, and so they're moving themselves around. But when you have limitations, whether that be an age limitation or a disability limitation, or just maybe you never learned how to drive or you can't afford to own a car, these transportation services become absolutely critical to our region. And to the population that you're serving. Let's talk a little bit about that, because both you and I are involved with a group called the Monadnock Region Coordinating Council on Transportation. And we see some of the challenges related to funding, support for transportation services. Give us your thoughts on what's happening here in the state, how that impacts us locally, and maybe even some things people can be advocates for.
Well, I'll tell you, first I'm going to share a little personal story with you. It really hit home when my mom, who drives, was unable to about a year or so ago because of an injury. And now I have 8 siblings, so there are 9 of us, and we all shared in transporting my mom to various appointments and to the supermarket. And I'll tell you, it puts a strain on you to get that one person around. But what we were able to do was access the place where I work, the Friendly Bus. So not only did I feel good about moving people I didn't even know around the City of Keene, but my own mom got to enjoy the service, and it gave us a break to pursue our jobs. All of us are employed. We all have children. We had things we needed to do. Not that we don't love you, Mom. I love you to death. But it was a lot easier to just use the Friendly Bus to get around. As you mentioned, the number one challenge to us has been, and I know it's not going to be a surprise to anybody, excuse me, funding. Every year we're faced with less and less funding and have to come up with different funding sources. So we're always grateful to folks like the United Way that help us out. The federal government gives us some funds, the state does. We get a little bit of money from advertising. We get some money from fares that we charge folks and from donations. But it's still a challenge for us to operate. What we try to do to make ourselves more efficient through organizations like the Monadnock Region for Coordinating Council and the State Coordinating Council, and also the New Hampshire Transit Association, is to try to coordinate services to try to make them more efficient so we're not all doing the same thing. We worked for years with the Red Cross coordinating rides, as I said before, up to White River Junction and the VA hospital, at the VA hospital, and then in Lebanon. The Red Cross is no longer transporting folks, But some of the people from that Red Cross organization have branched out and formed another volunteer organization, and we're still working with them to coordinate those rides. We coordinate rides with groups like CVTC, they're a volunteer driver network. So again, what we're all trying to do is work together to try to save on those ever-shrinking resources and to provide as many rides as possible to folks that need them, those necessary transportation needs.
And it's challenging. It is incredibly challenging. You know, you and I sit in a place of seeing what those resources are coming in, the support for it. You know, it's interesting because the story you shared made me think, if somebody feels like, well, this doesn't really impact me, I don't have an elderly person in my life, I don't have a disabled person in my life that's in need of these services, I want you to imagine for a moment what it feels like if you do have children, when you're trying to provide transportation to all their different activities out there, and this is just at the level of having to do that really for a different population. And you know, the thing is, we could all face it at any point in our lives. You know, I've had a 92-year-old woman living with us, and she still drives, but she's about to have to give up her license because it's her eyesight, her hearing, lots of things. And it's about her independence and her ability to get out there and still experience and enjoy life to the fullest. And she still works, you know, she still volunteers. She is an incredibly active socially. You know, people need to be able to get out. You can't have that sense of isolation. It has a very negative impact.
Absolutely. I don't know if I'll share a little statistic with you. On the average, for the last 10 years of a man's life and the last 7 years of a woman's life, they don't drive. For one reason or another, they can't hold a license, or they can't afford a car, or whatever the reason may be. So for the last 7 and 10 years, or 10 years of your life, you're going to rely on folks like us. That's why we're there. And as you say, it's to help you remain independent. It's a really, really tough day for someone to finally admit that they are no longer capable of driving an automobile safely. I know it's tough, and it's really hard to let go of those keys. And a lot of times we have to deal with families that are dealing with moms and dads and aunts and uncles who they feel aren't safe, and it's time for them to come off the road. And I get it, because as you say, that's their last little cling to independence. Maybe they're already living with a relative to help them get through life's daily challenges. So that loss of the keys, loss of that freedom to just walk out in the driveway and hop in your car, just to test yourself sometime, just take your keys and hand them to your neighbor sometime and try to go a week without that automobile out in the car, especially in rural New Hampshire. It's one thing to do that in the middle of New York City for some folks, like you mentioned earlier, that either never had a license, never needed one. There's public transportation all over the place, but in rural New Hampshire, we rely on that car. That's our lifeline to grocery shopping, to medical appointments, and like I said before, even to the beauty parlor. But for some of us, that's how we interact socially.
It is, and while we're talking here, I'm going to have Dave cue up some pictures that you've shared with us, and so that we can see some of what the bus looks like and some of the unique aspects to that bus system, because it's not just a bus. It's really to make it convenient for people to be able to utilize forms of transportation. And I think one of the pictures we'll see is, you know, a bike rack attached to the bus. So you can still have other things that utilize the system, but also maybe have those other aspects of your life, whether you're biking because of your health and you want to you know, get on the bike paths, or maybe you want to get a little further than the bus goes and you're going to use that bike from a point on from where the bus goes. So Dave, if we can pull those up, there's our bike rack.
There we go. And you'd be surprised at how many people make use of that bike rack year-round. We transport bikes in the middle of the winter sometimes. It's amazing, especially those new bikes with the big wide tires on them. It's a very popular service, and like you say, there are folks that like to use the bus for just part of the day and like to ride their bike for the rest of the day. There's a shot of another one of our City Express buses. This is one of the fixed route service, runs around town, makes regular stops.
And you've been running a campaign, I think, about hopping on the bus.
It's hip to hop the bus. Oh yeah, that's my director Susan's famous line. It's hip to hop the
Okay.
bus.
So here's the actual friendly bus, I believe.
This is one of the friendly buses. This
Yeah.
is actually a shot of our friendly bus up in White River. That's our weekly service on Wednesdays. Like I said before, that bus takes a trip up there and also to Lebanon. So folks can make appointments, call us a couple days before, let us know that you have an appointment up there. And we do ask that folks try to make their appointments between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m. just to make it more convenient for everyone on the bus so they're not sitting there waiting for 8 hours for someone to finish up.
Right. Again, what a critical service, because for a lot of people, when you're experiencing medical care, so if you're going up to the VA hospital, you may not be able to actually drive when you walk out because of the medical treatment you may have received.
Absolutely. We do allow folks to bring along an aide because sometimes folks head up to the hospital and they have a procedure done where they might be a little woozy afterwards, so they might need someone with them. So we try to save room. If there's room, you're allowed to bring an aide along with you. But like you said, it's a very handy service, very critical for some folks. It's the only way they can get up there. Now, if you think it's a challenge just getting around the city of Keene without a car, imagine the local hospital tells you need to be in Lebanon in 2 weeks to see a specialist. How are you going to get there without the help of, sometimes folks have neighbors that'll help them out, but that's where we step in.
And again, so vital to people's lives. Not only their independence, but their just overall well-being and their day-to-day living and quality of life, really. So what else do you want people to know about transportation? Because it's actually a really complex issue in rural locations.
It really is. Like I said before, it's one thing to operate a transit system in the city of New York. Buses just run all day long, and there are plenty of people hopping on and off the bus because there are plenty of people there. But in rural New Hampshire, it's a challenge because people are so spread out. They're so few and far between that it's tough for them to get to bus stops. We do what we can, and like I said, we're always open to suggestions from folks to try to help reach some of those areas. But we're kind of restricted due to funding and due to funding. That's the main challenge for us. For instance, we can't run a bus out through down to Richmond and Troy or over to Swansea every day to pick up 1 or 2 people. If there were, a large group of people and we could prove to the folks that we have to answer to that it was worth the service, then of course we could probably find some funding somewhere to do it. But right now, that's our #1 challenge, is that funding. And I want everybody to know, before I forget, that all of our buses are accessible. And by accessible, I mean if someone is in a mobility device, and I'm talking about all our city buses and our friendly buses. Someone's in a mobility device, we have lifts on all of our buses. All of our drivers are trained on how to secure those mobility devices. All of our drivers have to have CDLs with passenger endorsements to be able to operate these buses. It's a very, very, there's some very strict restrictions about who can operate these buses or not, which makes it, by the way, very difficult sometimes to find bus drivers. When we do find them, normally they're jewels. If someone's in the bus driving business on our end, they're doing it because they like to help people. They love what they're doing. They're not doing it to get rich. They're not doing it for the fame, even though, yes, all those folks, just like in Cheers, know their names, but they're doing it because that's what they truly enjoy doing.
So do you find a particular demographic that is really being served by, first, the City Express, but we know that you're serving folks that are older or with disabilities with the friendly bus. But on that City Express, is there a particular demographic?
Well, it's typically, it's folks without licenses. It's folks who can't afford to own and operate a car. It's folks who live downtown somewhere and have nowhere to keep a car, to tell you the truth, which is why it's easy for folks in New York City to use the transit system. Why own a car in New York City if it's going to cost you half your salary to park it and not use it if you don't need it? But Mainly what it is, folks who just have no other means of getting around the city, either because they can't afford a car or they don't have the means to store a car. I mean, it's just, for some folks, it's just easier. It's a lot more convenient for them.
So we have some things happening locally where this Monadnock Region Coordinating Council has really been working on developing a vision. They're coming back together to really set some goals and objectives collectively about transportation for across the Monadnock region. What else is happening here locally that you think will have impact on transportation?
Wow, that's a pretty broad question. But what's happened recently locally is, like I mentioned before, the loss of the Red Cross that was quite a blow to this region. The Red Cross moved quite a few people with their volunteer driver network around. So what we've been trying to do is coordinate rides with CVTC, for example, where we have reached out to other local transportation providers, like the local taxi companies, to see just what it is we can do to help folks get to these needed services. We only operate so many hours a day, so many days a week, and sometimes that's not convenient for folks. So the council's trying to come up with ways to come up with some sort of system where folks have more access at different hours of the day or night. Again, if you don't have a car at noon, you still don't have the same car at 8 o'clock at night. But at noon, you can hop on a bus. So what do you do at 8 o'clock at night? And if you have some sort of emergency that doesn't require an ambulance, let's say. So that's what we're trying to work on with them, and then to try to reach some of these outlying areas. Like I said, it's not economically feasible for us to make trips out into those outlying areas every day, but how do we get those folks into Keene? I don't know if you're aware, but the population of the city of Keene at night is about 23,000 people, I think, and during the day, it's
over 40, I think.
Okay,
yeah.
That's a pretty big influx of folks coming into this city every day. Well, we want to help get them here. We all know that it's a challenge finding a parking spot in Keene. There just isn't enough. So we're trying to get folks to use public transit. And by the way, it's very easy to access us if you're in the city of Keene. We're on the Google Maps app. We recently added that with the help from someone over at Southwest Regional Planning Commission. You can just use any smartphone. It'll of course, your phone recognizes where you are. You hit the transit icon, which is just a picture of the front of a bus. Type in where you want to go, and Google Maps will tell you when the next bus is scheduled to arrive wherever you are and the quickest way to get there. So we're trying to make it more convenient for folks. We know that's how you reach out to younger folks. I've run, every once in a while, I wear many hats at HCS, and every once in a while I'm actually a bus driver. We're a very small outfit, and if enough guys call out, I'm sitting in a bus, which is kind of fun once in a while to get out of the office. But every once in a while I'll drive the campus shuttle around. And the only time I've ever seen a student at Keene State College use a bus schedule is to borrow it, take a picture of it with their phone and store it, and then go about their business. They don't carry around pieces of paper. They don't want to have to go online, which is why we helped, with the help of Southwest, develop that app for Google Maps so kids can take a look.
That's fabulous, because we know this is a world that sort of lives by their phones nowadays, it seems like. But if people had questions about the transportation services you're providing, how they could access them, or how they might access them for a family member or a friend, how would they reach out to you?
Well, they could call us at our telephone number, which is 352-8494. Ask for me. I'd be glad to talk to anyone. I can put them in touch with a variety of places. If it's a service that we can't provide, we actually have a directory. I can tell someone how to go online and access this directory. Southwest just published a new directory recently for every town in our area, in the Monadnock region, for folks to be able to look it up. But I'd be glad to do it for you. Anyone has any issues or any questions or wants to know how to get around or get from one place to another anytime, feel free.
So really not just providing the service, but being a referral for service.
Absolutely.
That people can just reach out through home health care hospice, through your website. I'm sure they can find your phone number. Michael's the transportation manager there. So lots of different ways they can reach out, and of course they can always call 211. here in the state if they need direction to transportation. So if you can't remember anything else, public, remember 211 or call the United Way offices here and we'll redirect you to Michael over at Home Healthcare Hospice and Community Services. So Michael, we didn't get a lot of opportunity to really talk about what's happening at the state level with transportation. But I'm not sure, we're coming towards the end of the show here. So I wanted to see if there's anything specific you really want to communicate about how people can be advocates, be involved with transportation and making a difference to make sure that that reaches the public.
Well, I guess the best way is for folks to ride the bus. Come ride the bus. Even just for a fun afternoon, come hop on the bus with us. It's hip to hop the bus. We're running a couple of specials. Occasionally we run a free ride day, and we're doing that the day after Thanksgiving on Plaid Friday.
Nice.
And in fact, that day you can buy a month-long pass that'll bring you through the end of the year for $10, and that's a bargain. You can use that pass as many times as you'd like. So I guess the best way is to hop on that bus, because the more riders we have, the better things look, and I guess you could let your representative know how important transportation is to you as a little sideline, but I'd say the best way is to come ride our bus, see how friendly we are.
And again, if you need to reach out to Home Healthcare Hospice Community Services, Michael Oserno, transportation manager there. He will help connect you to transportation somehow here in the Monadnock region. Michael, I want to thank you for joining us today, because it is really a critical service. It's so important to the livelihood for people, the well-being, the independence, just all of those things. So thanks for joining us and bringing this issue to the forefront for our community. And I want to thank you, public, for joining us tonight, and want to remind you to remember to give, to volunteer, and to advocate.